Nicholas Stern, in his report, said that climate change represents the greatest market failure ever seen. If we're going to manage to get the 50% cut in global greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, and that means an 80% cut in developed nations, it means very rapidly there's going to need to be a redeployment of capital into environmental technology companies. Those companies are going to have to grow very large, very quickly, for us to be able to make those kind of cuts in carbon emissions that the world needs. And so, large institutional investors who are investing for the long term are very interested in investing in these companies because they will offer very large potential returns in the future. Equally, as well as investing specifically in this fairly kind of niche market, because it is small at the moment, it's growing rapidly, but it is a small market currently. There's also the interest in, across all of their equity investments, investing in those companies which are better positioned for a carbon-constrained world. So those companies which are more efficient in their use of energy, those companies which produce lower greenhouse gas emissions, are going to face lower costs as carbon starts increasing in price, which it inevitably will do over the decades ahead. And so it provides an interesting opportunity for investors to identify those companies which are more efficient relative to their peers and invest in those companies. And we can see that investment is changing. In the current climate, it's quite clear that a lot of investment has been very, very short-term focused. And the way that we invest needs to change, particularly when most investment is coming from large institutional investors. Pension schemes are interested in long-term returns. And if you're trying to understand the long-term performance of a company, you've got to understand it in a much wider context. You've got to understand how it's performing in terms of its environmental performance, how it's treating its people, how it's treating the communities that it's operating in. And that will give you a good understanding of how likely a company is to perform well over the long term. Well, I guess, climate change has been a wake-up call to understanding environmental constraints and creating markets to deal with those constraints. But as we deal with climate change, we'll probably also be needing to pick up and deal with other environmental challenges, whether it is water scarcity or whether it's simply kind of beginning to run out of different resources that we need. And so then needing to have a much greater focus on recycling and reuse, and actually not treating waste as waste, but seeing it actually as a very precious new raw material to use in a different process. And so actually looking at businesses much more like an ecosystem and seeing waste streams actually becoming resource streams for other industries.